When it comes to photography, light really is one of the most important aspects, be it blue hour, golden hour, or even midday harsh light. Having good light can really make a photo. However, what do you do when the light is, well, a little bit rubbish? I'm from the UK, so I'm all too familiar with that grey, dull, dreary light that we get most days of the year. Everything just looks grey, boring, flat, and it's just not very inspiring for photography. However, we might not have the option to choose what type of light we're shooting. Perhaps you have a job, family, kids, the only time you can shoot is on a Saturday afternoon, and if it happens to be grey, you still want to go out and shoot and not sit at home. Equally, if you're travelling, you're in the city for just a weekend, if it happens to be an overcast weekend, what you're going to do, just not take any photos? That's not realistic. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some tips that I have found very useful in getting the best out of boring, grey, dreary light. Also, towards the end of the video, I will show you how I would go about editing some of these photos. Let's start with the most basic and useful tip, and that is to overexpose your shots. Personally, I like to overexpose by 0.3 or even 0.6 stops in camera, and then further adjust as needed when I am editing. Seek out naturally high contrast environments. This is usually done by shooting from a darker place into a brighter place. A source of light does not always need to be the sun. Simply having a large brighter area flood a smaller darker area, you can create natural contrast. Then shoot either 90 degrees to the brighter area or straight into it. In editing, you can increase the contrast a little, but be careful, it is very easy to overcook it. Better get as much natural contrast in camera as possible and fine tune it later in post. If you are a properly exposed histogram in the middle enthusiast, then you might want to skip this section because your feelings will be hurt. There is nothing wrong with blowing out a dark grey sky. Okay, when I say blowing out, I don't mean pure white, I mean just before pure white. So for example, if pure white is 100%, you want to have your whites at around 95-96%. But there is no detail in the sky, it's just a one uniform sort of slightly off-white color. Now you might ask why? Well, unless you find various shades of grey arousing, not judging by the way, then having a perfectly exposed, boring, cloudy sky is just going to make everything look a little bit miserable. Of course, if there are crazy clouds, that's a completely different ball game and a different discussion. However, I'm talking about like kind of blanket grey with the odd slightly darker shade of grey patch in the middle of it. So next time you're out shooting on an overcast day, don't be too scared about boosting that exposure and losing some of the details in the sky. When everything is dull and grey, seek out colour. Find colourful subjects, backgrounds and foregrounds. Don't overdo it, however, as having too many colourful elements can lead to visual confusion. Instead, opt for one or two bright colourful items to brighten up the entire shot. You can also work with the colour that you already have in post by increasing the vibrancy, saturation, or moving the colours around to make them all match each other a little bit better. Obviously, your taste will be different to everyone else's, so see what works and what doesn't. At the end of the day, have as much colour in your image as possible, ideally in camera from the scene, or if not, try to find a way to exaggerate the colour that you already have in editing. The absence of strong good light can make all the little boring details in your image become visible and distracting. Try to simplify your scene as much as you can and have a clear subject. Maybe use foreground elements to hide part of the frame, or maybe you find areas of natural contrast and hide some of the mess in the dark shadows. However you go about it, always try to keep the scene simple. One of the easiest ways to achieve this is to use a longer lens. I'm talking about 50, 85 and 135mm and up. By using a longer lens, you make it easier to compose and remove distractions. Of course, as you become better at this, you can go wider, but keep in mind the wider the lens, the more difficult it is going to be to have a clean and simple scene. If you want to add another layer or element to your image, try shooting in the rain. Not only will you get reflections and an overall softer image, but the colors will pop more too. You will also get people with umbrellas, people running, hiding, and covering, so plenty more subjects to shoot. Of course, photography in the rain comes with its own set of challenges and risks, the obvious one being keeping yourself and your camera dry. However, that is a topic for another video. The last tip is to shoot in black and white. Chances are on a grey day there is not much colour, so why not just remove it out of the equation entirely and focus on exposure and tonality. By shooting black and white, you will find that the scene is no longer as dull as it seemed when shooting in colour. This will hopefully give you some confidence and result in good images too. Finally, the tips I shared earlier about exposure, contrast and blowing out the sky also apply here. Now it's time to edit some of these photos and show you how I would go about editing from scratch without any presets. With that in mind, I want to thank today's video sponsor, which is Skylum, for providing me Lumina Neo to do this demonstration. Lumina is a pretty unique editing software, as you would see in the following demo. Let's start with the first photo in Edinburgh. The first thing we need to do is to straighten all the verticals using the transform tool. Then crop the image a little bit, just remove that bottom edge that's a little bit too protruding in my opinion. Once we've cropped, boost the exposure a little bit because it is a bit overcast, drop the shadows because I'm going for quite a contrasty look. Then we're into the curves. I want to add an S-curve and also fade the whites and the blacks. The S-curve will give it a more of a moody, high contrast look, and fading the whites and the blacks will just remove the pure white and pure black of the image. Next, we need to adjust the temperature. I want this image to be a little bit cooler and also have a bit more of a green tint to it. Now we're into the HSL, and this is where we'll get really creative with the overall colors. I want to exaggerate the orange headlights from the car, make them brighter, more vibrant, and also I want to slightly reduce the blues in the image. Moving on to the hues, I want to make the oranges a little bit more orange, and I want to make the blues a little bit more teal. Finally, with the luminance, I want to have the oranges of the headlights a little bit brighter and the blues and the colder tones a little bit darker. Slightly drop the structure, therefore making the image a little bit softer. Moving on to the toning, we want to have some warmer tones in the highlights and cooler tones in the shadows. To do that, I'll boost the saturation, find the color that I like, and then drop the saturation until I am happy with the overall result. The mystical feature is effectively like auto effect, but in one slider. Add some film grain, add some general warmth to the image, and we're done. So here's the before, after, before, after. Alright, onto the second photo from Paris. Let's start with the crop as always. I'm quite happy with this. I don't think it needs too much cropping, just tighten it up a little bit. Boost the exposure a little bit, but overall I'm happy. Drop the highlights quite a bit because there's a few blown out areas. However, we'll increase the black and the white points for a bit more contrast. Now into the curves, same S-curve as before with the faded whites and blacks. However, this time we'll slightly keep the highlights a bit down to preserve them from blowing out. Now we're onto the temperature adjustment, where I want to just slightly warm up the image but also introduce a bit of green tint. Let's also boost the saturation while we're here for the colors. Now let's go into the HSL, start with saturation, and I really want to exaggerate the colors of the scooter. So we're looking at the purples, magentas, cyans and blues. So play around with them until I get to a level where I am comfortable and I think it looks good. There is a bit of yellow in the road as well that I want to remove. Now let's have a look at the hues, and overall all I want to achieve here is just to get the colors to match each other a little bit better and just see what works. The best way to do it is just to mess around with them a little bit and see what works better to your eye. Same as before, just want to drop the structure to give the image an overall softer look. Now into split toning again. So here I want to add some greens into the shadows, so boost the saturation, find the color, and then drop it down again. Highlights, I'm looking for maybe a bit of red. No, red looks quite good here. A tiny bit of the mystical adjustment, which gives the image a bit of a pop, a bit of film grain as always. And we're into the last section where we're gonna tidy up the image by removing some of these spots, which in my opinion just distract and overall make the image look a little bit messy. As I've said earlier, you want to keep the image as clean as possible, and in my opinion, removing these little details Doesn't take away from the photo, yet it cleans everything up, as you will see in a minute. So there's the before, after, before, and after. So this should have given you a quick demo of Lumina Neo. Honestly, I've only covered about 10% of all the features. I'll be here all week if I were to cover everything. There is so much more here that you can explore, edit, and mess around with. If you want to find out more for yourself and explore, then please use the link down below or use the code RomanFox for a discount. Thank you so much for watching this bit of the video, because by supporting my sponsors, you also support me. Okay, and that is all for today. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you found these tips and suggestions useful as well. Many of you liked the shooting in harsh midday light video. That's done really well, and hopefully this will help you even more. So thank you ever so much for watching, and tune in into the next video at some point next week. Thanks again, have a good week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.